Welcome to this week's episode of Insight, during which show we're going to cover two topics. The first one is going to be a raid on the headquarters of Gigi, which is a ride-sharing service by the tax authorities. Then we're going to move on to the second topic of the week, which is the announced purchase of the Caesar artillery systems by the Armenian military. Last week, there was a raid on the headquarters of the GG ride-sharing service. For people who don't know, it's essentially the second biggest taxi service in Armenia after the Russian-owned Yandex. It's the one that's locally owned and locally created. The founder and the owner of the company, Eric, has been a big critic of this government and a supporter of the protests against it, and has been for years, actually. Last week, his offices and the offices of GG were raided by the investigative committee, which seized computers as evidence. There have been reports of dubious billing practices that have been carried up on the company on passengers. However, Mr. Grigorian's attorney claimed that these actions are a response to Mr. Grigorian's outspoken political views. Armenia's investigative committee denied the raid was politically motivated in a press release Monday, and said that the search actually stems from tax evasion charges going back years. UATE, which is essentially the trade group for the IT industry, protested this raid and actually said that this is very harmful to the country's image as a headquarters, as essentially what we are now, which is Silicon Mountain. And UATE is actually probably the most significant business group in this country, so they actually carry a lot of weight. And they were very quick in denouncing this and actually outlining other cases in which IT companies had been targeted for political purposes. In analyzing this, frankly, this is outrageous on all levels. No one loses their constitutional right by having a successful business or making a lot of money. Even if there are real tax reasons or business practice reasons to look into this company, the timing of this thing is exceptionally questionable. And overall, if freedom means anything, is to have opinions that your government does not like, and even further than that, the ability to tell your government to go to hell. The politicization of law enforcement and the judicial system is a road to hell, and that's not the path that we should be taking. Now we're going to move on to our second topic of the week, which is the big news of the week, which is the announced purchase of the Caesar artillery systems from France by the Armenian military. Now, let's just go over what are the Caesar systems. There's actually one of the top, if not the top, mobile artillery system in the world. They essentially can fire and go in a minute and change their locations. This system is very much battle-tested, especially in Ukraine, and it's very much sought after by armies from around the world, the Western ones at least. In fact, once these orders are fulfilled, we will actually have far more systems than even Ukraine has currently in the battlefield against the Russian military. We will be receiving 36 of these systems over the next year to 15 months. This is a self-propelled artillery system with a firing range of more than 40 kilometers, and they cost about $3.5 to $4 million each. This news comes many months after the announced purchase of French anti-aircraft radar systems and anti-aircraft missile systems, along with the trainings that go with it. Symbolically, the Caesar systems have great political symbolic value because they're one of the prides of French military industrial complex. And in so many words, as their defense minister said, almost whatever France produces, obviously outside of nuclear weapons at this point, including long-range rockets, are available for Armenia to purchase. This, along with agreements that were inked with Germany about 2 weeks ago, means that essentially the entirety of the Western military-industrial complex outside of the United States is currently open for us for purchases, and I know that there's actually specific talks going on with 3 to 5 European countries, like Germany and many others, for future military purchases. A piece of interesting news that's actually lost among all this news of these foreign purchases is that this government has actually put away somewhere around $500 million for local military purchases from our military-industrial complex, which is essentially starting from scratch over the last few years. And this is actually very good news because in the long run, you have to be able to produce a good part of your own weapons. Obviously, we won't be able to produce everything, but this is good in the sense that not only are you kickstarting this industry and they will have a consistent customer in the Armenian military, but it also leads to the essentially reindustrialization of the country, especially in areas that are critical to us. In analyzing all this, these are obviously all very good things and they are critical for our long-term security. However, in the short run, and from a very practical point of view, we're actually entering a very dangerous period, and for a couple of different reasons. The first one being that the time is not on the side of our enemy anymore. And we all know that we're entering that when you purchase these weapons and systems, there's a time gap between purchase, delivery, training, and being able to use it. And this time gap is actually quite dangerous because the enemy knows that once these current advantages that they have are mitigated, they are never likely to establish themselves again. We have to see and understand this reality, which is very much reflected in their actions and the rhetoric that come out of the regime in Baku and her proxies. And the messaging that we've been getting since the purchase of these military systems is the following. One is that they cannot allow the current balance of forces to change in any way that it essentially mitigates their advantage. That secondly is that they need to attack Armenia before Armenia fully arms itself again and is better prepared to defend herself. And what we've seen in the last week or 10 days is, again, the start of these fake reports of our side shooting at their positions, which have all been disproven. And what's important here is actually to move and to actually look and study the collective Russian Azeri response to these purchases, which is very much one and the same and choreographed. And if you're actually going to describe, you're going to use one word to describe their reaction, it is histrionics. If you look at these coordinated Baku-Moscow responses to Armenia's rearming itself, again, they work off of the same talking points. One is that these weapons purchases disrupt the peace process. Secondly, and that France and Macron would be responsible for any future war between Armenia and the Baku regime. That furthermore, that more weapon sales are destabilizing, which is absurdity on the face of it, given the fact that what they're arguing is that their side can continue to purchase weapons and our side has no right to purchase weapons to defend itself. So if, obviously one feeds to the other. So this logic behind it is the fact that there is no logic. And Hikmet Hajayev, and let me just explain who he is. He is described by diplomats who work Baku as Baku Goebbels. He's sort of the spokesperson for the regime in Baku. He went as far as to say that it's actually inadmissible for other countries to arm Armenia. And in the case of France, that France, since it's a member of the UN Security Council, has the responsibility not to arm Armenia. And the funniest part with that is that all the Security Council countries are actually the biggest arms merchants in the world. So this is just obviously absurd on the face of it. The Armenian Foreign Ministry actually responded quite forcefully to all of this, all of these collective attack lines between Moscow and Baku, outlining our ability and our right to defend ourselves in all situations. As far as Mr. Hikmet Hajayev is concerned, this is what I have to say.
I have one thing to say to you. Kiss my fat ass.
In conclusion, the most important thing for us to understand is that if they were not complaining, and what by they I mean Baku and Moscow, we would be doing something wrong. Their diarrhea of words directed at us should be music to our ears. When you step back and you try to understand where this hysteria between these two regimes comes from, let's just study it one by one. One, if there's an Armenia that can defend itself, it means that Russia can no longer weaponize its proxy in Baku to attack and punish Armenia for her western pivot. An Armenia that can defend itself raises the cost of attacking the Armenian enemy for the regime in Baku, and an enemy that the Baku regime cannot survive without. The faster Armenia arms itself and achieves deterrence, the closer we will be to peace. That is all in the short term. In the medium run, what we need to look at is to move from deterrence to equality. And in the long run is to move towards full spectrum dominance, which is the only thing that can achieve both justice and security for Armenia. Thank you for joining me this week's episode of Insights.
Hitler's boyfriend, the deflated Mussolini, was carted off to Germany by plane following his rescue by Nazi paratroops. Captured enemy films show how, after being kept a prisoner in central Italy, he was whisked off to become a Nazi stooge. At Hitler's headquarters, the comedy of errors reached a peak of buffoonery as Muzzo tried oh so hard to look his former self in front of Mr. Schicklgruber. A kiss for Papa. Mussolini's son, who is with the Nazis, held back on a crack about how well he thought he looked, and the fraudulent head of a fake fascist regime shook hands with Ribbentrop. What a parody of those former meetings. One arrogant career which has hit the ignominious bottom. Yes, there you have them. Hitler, Ribbentrop, and the flat tire.